Spider-Man Unlimited is an animated series that aired for one season back in the year of 1999. Being as a loose sequel to Spider-Man the Animated Series, this show is produced by Saban Entertainment. Due to a contract issue between Marvel Entertainment and Fox Kids, Spider-Man Unlimited was created. Although it was poorly received and criticized, there are many fans like myself who enjoy this show for what it is. The original plan was for them to make a low-budget animated series about the early issues of the Amazing Spider-Man comics. But when Marvel sold the rights to Spider-Man to Sony, this caused the team at Saban Entertainment unable to use any of the supporting characters within the Spider-Man mythos, as well as any of the stories. Looking at the series, one would say it's like they wanted to make a Spider-Man 2099 show, but didn't want to fully commit to it, which you'd be right to say. The team toyed with the idea of a Spider-Man 2099 series, but Batman Beyond had been airing at the time, and well, if you know anything about those two characters, you're aware that they, as well as their worlds, are very similar. After Sony released Spider-Man the New Animated Series, Saban still needed to create a series, so Marvel sent over a list of things they wanted to be included in the show, such as Counter-Earth, Venom, John Jameson, and etc. An early pitch for the show would see Spider-Man arriving on Counter-Earth looking for a way home. There, he would find an alternate Uncle Ben who hadn't been killed, and a counter Spider-Man who kept the alien symbiote and became Venom. The production staff enjoyed this pitch and began their work on the show, but Marvel had PTSD from the Clone Saga, and taking into consideration how badly that story turned out, they didn't like the idea of two Peter Parkers. So, that idea had been reworked. When a misunderstood incident causes Carnage and Venom to be stowaway and headed into space with John Jameson, the city of New York turns on Spider-Man, leading him to temporarily retire before donning a new suit and heading off to follow Jameson to Counter-Earth in order to save the astronaut and clear his friendly neighborhood name. While on Counter-Earth, Peter is somewhat out of his element because although some of the buildings and people look familiar, there's a lot of this planet that isn't like the New York he knows. Beastmen, which are intelligent humanoid animals, seem to be the dominant species alongside humans, but are slowly taking over, pushing the humans out. Spider-Man finds Jameson, who is fighting with the Resistance, who are a colorful cast of characters, and after debating whether he should just leave completely, considering this planet's problems on his own, he eventually decides to stay, at least until he can get his ship back, with Spider-Man almost acting like a bridge between both species, since he's both spider and man. Peter meets Naoko and her annoying son Shane, where he's invited to stay with them until he's able to get his own place and get a job as a photographer at the Daily Bite. There's also a Counter-Earth Goblin and other counter versions of Spider-Man's classic rogues, who can only be explained as, well, they're not your average Spider-Man rogues gallery, I'll tell you that much. But that's kind of what's so interesting about them, considering that the creators of the show they weren't allowed to use original versions of these characters and weren't even allowed to use the classic red and blue suit. So to see that they created this entirely new world and injected a new corner of the Spider-Man mythos within this greater Spider-Verse can be only described as impressive. What's so interesting is since you've seen all these characters and villains so many times, to the point where you know their origins inside out, and you see them here, which can be quite jarring but is also intriguing. Also, this show has some pretty good sound design as well. Along with this being one of my favorite Spider-Man suits and theme song, it's also my favorite designs and even versions of Peter Parker. He's also voiced by my favorite Batman, Rino Romano, so that's a plus.
I like the Ben 10 Omnitrix thing he has on his hand. That's dope.
Funny enough, a few of my favorite episodes almost come one after the other, and are later on in the season, which makes sense. As a show goes on, the episodes should get better as we dive deeper into the plot. Those episodes are 7, 9, and 11. Cry Vulture is an episode where Spider-Man meets and teams up with Counter-Earth's version of the Vulture, who again is far different from the Vulture we know, taking into account that they couldn't use any of the supporting characters within the Spider-Man mythos, so they did what they could. And honestly, once you get to know these counter versions of these characters and where they come from, it can be actually pretty interesting. Episode 9 is titled Substance, where the Goblin returns and attacks Peter Parker after he finds out that he and Spider-Man are one and the same. As much as he questions Peter Parker as to why there are no records of him on the planet and why he just appears there one day, questions about Goblin come up as well, like his obsession with Naoko and Shane and why he wants Peter to stay away from them. Episode 11, titled One is the Loneliest Number, has to be my favorite episode of the show. When Venom is separated from Eddie Brock, Spider-Man, in a race against time with Carnage, in order to get the symbiote back before the clock runs out and Eddie dies. This episode not only solidifies that this show was meant to be a continuation of Spider-Man the Animated Series, but also goes into the relationship between Peter, Eddie, and the Venom symbiote. During its run, Spider-Man Unlimited had been going against Pokemon, which was airing at the same time as the show. Despite doing pretty well with ratings and holding its own, the show had been put on hiatus after only 3 episodes. After its 2-month hiatus, it was announced that the show had been cancelled because the president of Marvel Animation at the time wanted more shows that could compete with Pokemon. Due to this being the case, Spider-Man Unlimited was moved to various different time slots, as the network didn't really care for it, causing the audience to have trouble keeping up with the show. So, blame Pokemon, I guess. With Marvel's bankruptcy and the show's low ratings, Spider-Man Unlimited was left on a cliffhanger, which was intended to be paid off in the 2nd season, but was cancelled, leaving all its plot lines and character arcs that were set up to never be fulfilled. But even so, it now lives on Disney Plus as one of the most underrated Spider-Man series, as well as one of my favorites. But who said that this was the end of Spider-Man Unlimited? A version of the character was seen dead in the original Spider-Verse event, but another version of the character was seen fighting alongside the other spiders in Spider-Geddon. And with Across the Spider-Verse coming, maybe there's a chance this version of the character appears in either Part 1, Part 2, or some other Spider-Verse sequel. There's also the possibility of his suit being included in the upcoming Marvel Spider-Man 2 next year. I really like doing these types of videos because almost everyone talks about Spectacular Spider-Man and Spider-Man the Animated Series, but there's a lot of other variations of the character that should be acknowledged and, in my opinion, deserve just as much recognition. During its run, most fans were disappointed with the show because this came off the back of the animated series. But in my opinion, having Spider-Man on an alien planet saving lives in the middle of a war that he feels like he shouldn't be fighting while trying to find a way to get back home may seem like an odd storyline, but it's better than giving fans the same old Parker luck where he has to pay his bills and he's constantly struggling all the time over and over and over again. This version of the character is similar to previous iterations, but placing him in an environment where he doesn't want to be in, having to adapt and conflicted about saving the lives of beings that could care less about him on a world that has existed for years without him. But in the end, they're still people, and he's still Spider-Man. Spider-Man Unlimited is something different, and I appreciate its contribution within the world of the Spider-Verse. Basically, if you're looking for a more different take on the Spider-Man character and mythos, then this show is definitely for you. As always, thank you all for watching. Leave a like if you want, and I'll see you when I see you.